This is Inspired Wellness with Jessica, a safe space for women impacted by their emotions to unlock hope and discover ways to elevate emotional wellness holistically for long-term health and well-being. I am your host, Jessica, advanced EFT practitioner, holistic counselor, meditation therapist, and advanced life coach. Join me for real, raw conversations to educate and inspire you to take control of your emotional well-being. I am so grateful you are here with me. Let's dive straight in. Welcome to Inspired Wellness with Jessica. Today, I have a special guest joining us. Trauma breakthrough coach Sarah Lux is a multi-modality practitioner and certified life coach whose talent lies in her ability to identify and break down her clients' blockers, reprogram their mindset with tools and techniques that leave them empowered and with a newfound confidence and sense of self. As a trauma survivor herself, Sarah loves working with others affected by past trauma to remove its strangling hold on them and is renowned for the speed of results she helps enable through her breakthrough days. Sarah is also a loyal wife and mother to 3 gorgeous kids, her wolf pups, who are the inspiration behind her foundation, Wolfpack & Co., started in partnership with her son, who are on a mission to make every kid bully-proof. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited to talk to you. Sarah and I were chatting before the show, and we have a lot in common, a lot, and I love it. It's so nice to talk to somebody who gets it. It really is.
And who's passionate too. It's nice to see that passion in all across boards and making that difference and making that impact.
Absolutely. So, Sarah, do you want to tell listeners a little bit about you and how you got started doing what it is that you do?
Okay, so hello everybody. I actually started as a coach without any intention of becoming a coach. So my perception of myself was that I was actually broken. Cut a long story short, I had experienced a significant physical and emotional trauma when I was 18 years old. I was sexually assaulted. And when you experience a trauma on any level, your brain designs behaviors to keep you safe in order for your survival, because that's what it's designed to do, right? It's designed to keep us alive. So those behaviors served a purpose when I was 18 through to 23, until I decided that enough was enough. But it wasn't until I actually became a mum that those behavioral patterns resurfaced. I started to live my life on repeat. I'd wake up, I'd do what I needed to do. I'd feed, bath, go to appointments, naps, feed, change, bath again. And what happened was the unresolved emotional trauma resurfaced. Throughout the years, I had seen psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, counselors, healers, EFT practitioners, energy workers, hypnosis, you name it, I had done it. And they all served a purpose along that time journey. But the emotional trauma was never resolved. The mental aspect of it was, so when I thought about it, I could make sense of it, but I would still have this feeling like I had a physiological response to it and an emotional response. It started to affect my marriage. I didn't want to be intimate with my husband. I had a short fuse and he was walking on eggshells. I would become so angry at my kids that it wasn't just being pissed off or annoyed. I was fuming mad, and it was so quick to get there. I was literally like a ticking time bomb. And when I looked in the mirror, I felt empty. I had no idea who that person was. And I didn't like it. There was no spark or passion behind my eyes. They were completely glazed over and blank. So that was when I actually decided that my family would be better off without me. My husband and I that night had a conversation on our wardrobe floor, and I told him I was leaving. I no longer liked the person I was. I didn't know what was going on. I was terrified of the person I had actually become. And I was so scared that I would say something or do something to either him or the kids or myself that I would regret. We both cried. And I said, I'm so torn because I love you so much. Like I've never loved another soul. And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, stay. Whatever it is, whatever you need, we will find it and we will get you the help that you need to get through this. I laughed, of course, natural response, right? But then I was so bewildered because I'd done it all. No one in my mind had been able to fix me, right? Wasn't until I was breastfeeding one night that I was scrolling on my phone and life coaching came up and I thought, what's this? Something sparked an interest within me. And I figured there's no point in paying for a coach because I've paid for all of these other practitioners that I'm still broken in my eyes. And I really wanted this done and for all. But what I also wanted to do was I wanted to study it so that in the hope that the trainers who know the most about it would be able to fix me. But then in that, I would learn something to help repair my parenting and my relationship with my kids, but also my relationship with my husband. I'd basically be able to repair the damage that I'd caused whilst these behavioral patterns resurfaced. Little did I know that that would completely change the trajectory of my entire life. So I started studying my master's in life coaching, which covers a huge array of areas. And I was just absorbing information. And there was this one moment in one of my trainings that resolved absolutely everything. And it happened in an instant. I was standing, I got selected so I could stand at the front of the room for this particular technique. And I was in front of all of my peers. I wasn't aware that they were there, but this moment completely changed my life. The trainer was successful at doing what no other modality had ever been able to get me the results that I wanted. And in that moment, I was given the gift of emotional freedom. I felt lighter. I felt like the water throughout my whole body just rippled from my head all the way down to my toes. And I walked out of the room taller, calmer, more grounded, and more at peace than I had been or had ever felt. And I can only remember it being in my childhood that I felt like this. When I got home that night, my husband, Stephen, he opened the door and he looked me in the eyes and his eyes welled up instantly and he said, oh, there she is. I've got my wife back. And in that moment, I decided that there was no way that I could keep this information and everything that I had learned up until this moment to myself. It was in that moment that I decided to become a coach and give others the gift of emotional freedom then too.
Oh, gosh. Wow. What an amazing story and what an amazing gift to be sharing with the world as well. That moment where you just know that what has been stored in your body for so many years, right down to a cellular level, has finally let go. And I can only make a small assumption, but that mindset of yours must have had a little shift as well from being that someone had to fix you to you have actually healed yourself.
100%, because
I believe that won't happen.
Exactly. And until I decided that I wanted it, like I needed it, and I had everything that I needed already within me. And that moment I realized how powerful women are and how powerful human beings are, really, because every single person has that within themselves.
Absolutely. During your story, you spoke about when you were having your trauma reactions
Mhm.
resurface from
Yeah.
what had been, you know, I guess what you thought was dealt with at the time, but maybe suppressed to some element when they were resurfacing when you're a mum and you're talking about the 0 to 100
Mhm.
rage. That's something that I hear a lot and from women, from mums,
Mhm.
and something that I really feel like with so much emphasis on positive parenting, the ability to feel your emotions and allow yourself to be human, um, sometimes is kind of taken away a little bit from us mums. And if
Yeah.
we do have those snaps
Mhm.
where, and it may be because we have unresolved trauma ourselves, or because we are going through chronic stress or relationship strains, or we have unmet self-care needs.
Mhm.
If we're not able to actually take care of ourselves, and it builds and it builds. I've been in that position many times. And I've got tools to help myself, but it still happens because I'm human, where
Yes.
everything will be fine 1 minute. And then somehow I just want to scream, or I am screaming, or and it's rage.
Mhm.
It really is a mum rage. And I know, well, you said before, society, as you said before, society,
Mhm.
before we were recording, society
Yeah.
almost shames it.
Well, like
Um,
society has this
yeah.
perception that mothers are nurturing, that they're loving, that they're patient. And we've got to remember that mothers are human beings, and human beings have core needs. And
Mhm.
these core needs are innate needs that they need to be met. And these include things like sleep, food, water, safety. And what happens when you become a mother is that, you know, you now have this tiny dependent that's in you're responsible for. And over time, we give and we give and we give and we give, and we deplete ourselves. In World War II, they used sleep deprivation as torture.
Mm.
And it's a real thing with our human survival. You know, our tolerance, like we need to be rejuvenated or our tolerance threshold shrinks. And we become emotionally reactive, and we have these outbursts, emotional outbursts that happen. And it's like riding an emotional roller coaster, and it's suppressed because society has this perception of us, and it has over generations, that mothers have this identity that they bounce back after having a baby, that they are calm and present, and that all external environmental circumstances like paying a mortgage, putting food on the table, getting children off to school, understanding children, like, we have this identity that she knows it all as soon as she
Mm.
becomes a mother. But what happens is that people come over with a new mum and they go, here, let me take the baby so you can have a shower. Or here, let me take the baby so you can, get the washing on or vacuum. And it's like, no, no, no. Let's rewind this a bit. Why don't you bring a meal so I can meet my baby's needs?
Mm.
Because that baby has known me for 9 months and is dependent, wants to sleep on me. I'm its safety. It has not yet survived without me. And it's dependent on my milk supply. It's dependent on myself. Like they regulate their temperature, through skin on skin contact. When a baby is in the uterus, it doesn't need to actually, it doesn't need to understand gravity. Like it experiences gravity for the first time when it's born. So it's dealing with a whole heap of things, which then the mother gives and gives and gives. The mother becomes depleted, and then their emotional tolerance threshold shrinks because we're depleted and our needs are not being met.
Mm.
And that's where that suppression of the rage and frustration and outbursts all come from, is because literally our tolerance threshold shrinks, our circle of tolerance shrinks, and we fly off the handle.
Absolutely.
And then we get
And
judged
mm,
and shamed
yeah.
and made guilty because our needs are not being met.
Hmm. Yeah. And then you throw into that as well, the whole new emotional aspect too of that new identity. And you're grappling with all of these internal stressors as well. Like perhaps body image issues, getting comfortable or getting to know a new body that you most likely aren't overly comfortable with, if we're being
Yeah.
honest, because a lot of new mums are not,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then that whole, you know, identity of who am I? All these things that I used to do that I want to do, I
You're
can no longer do.
grieving,
That's exactly right. You are
and
going
grief
through a grief
stacks.
process. Yeah.
Grief stacks. So, and I don't say grief as in a loss of a life.
Mm.
Just like you were talking about, it's a loss of identity. It's a loss of a job. It's moving places, moving like houses, moving states.
Mhm.
The grief of what you didn't get to experience, the birth you didn't have.
Anything
Like,
you perceive as a loss, anything. It doesn't have to be a
yes,
loss of a person. Yeah.
yes. And that stacks. And over time, if we continue to stack grief and it's not resolved, that's emotional suppression in itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm,
And so when we are suppressing our emotions, I know from the work that I do, and I do a lot within the body,
mhm,
and work a lot too with people who come, you know, with say an illness or a pain, and we work backwards from
mhm,
that to get right down into the body, and we are finding suppressed emotions,
mhm,
things that people think they either have dealt with and maybe they have to a certain level, but you know, everything's got a lot of table legs holding it up. So and nothing is single aspected, everything
mhm,
has multiple aspects.
mhm,
So maybe you have dealt with an aspect of it, but once you are able to actually identify and actually allow yourself to feel, which also is another thing too that I really feel like or I observe that society doesn't really encourage, and that's to feel those unwanted emotions. So and we do it right from when we have kids. Oh, stop crying, you're okay. You know, oh, you don't need to cry about
mm.
that, or you know, that sort of
You'll
language
be
that
right. The
exactly.
suppression
That's
language. Mhm,
exactly it is that language straight away that right from when we're brought up is telling us that these uncomfortable feelings that make the person who is with you feel uncomfortable because they may not know how to deal with it, probably because of their upbringing,
mhm,
you know, that we shouldn't be feeling it. And if we have an emotion such as anger or rage or something that is negative, it is our nature to want to push it back down. Well, really, it's our
mhm.
nature to want to express it, but it's society's nature to want us to push it back down.
Because they don't know how to
It
deal
causes
with it.
damage. That's right.
Like, if someone's angry and they're doing angry, the other person's like, well, I don't know what to do. Like, you need to not feel that because I'm uncomfortable. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it's like, all I say this to my kids all the time and to my clients, all emotions are valid, all behaviors are not.
That's right.
So if a child is angry or if a parent is angry, me picking a chair up and throwing it across the room is pretty unresourceful. It's not going to get me the outcome that I want to get, right? Or a child, you know, who's angry and rage, hitting a sibling because they've got this surge of energy that they just don't know what else to do. Unresourceful behavior. Whereas I could, if I wanted to punch something, I could go to a boxing class or a fitness class, or if I've got that surge of energy, I could do a physical activity.
Mm.
If I've got that, you know, and also too, if we look at emotions on a spectrum, if we don't feel the whole spectrum and we feel a small amount, I think the most common three emotions there was a study done that 7,000 participants could only name, the average of emotions was three, and it was happy, sad, and angry.
Mm.
So we have this emotional spectrum. We cannot understand or really embody completely what love or joy, happiness, elation is if we don't understand anger, frustration, pissed off, rage.
Mm-hmm.
Because how can we get to that end of the spectrum if we don't know how far it goes the other way?
Mm.
And so, really developing the language around emotions, developing the understanding of emotions in that they flow, we have a baseline emotion that we spend most of our time in, which might be contentment, or, it's no one can be 100% joyful all the time. So we have this baseline emotion, but really getting people to understand that emotions flow. And I like to use the analogy like waves on the beach. Some waves are bigger than others. Some waves come in faster. Some waves stay on the sand longer, but they all go back out into the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's that flow. Emotions flow. So feel what you need to feel. Yeah. And especially with parents, we talk about with my clients, we have in the moment strategies and outside the moment strategies. So say, for example, if you're starting to become annoyed or frustrated or pissed off, it's, in the moment, if you're in the middle of a shopping center, you might not be able to do anger or frustration resourcefully. You're probably more inclined to get out.
Get in the car.
Yeah, right. Where you might be more, your outcome is to leave the shopping center with your child intact, right? Without leaving your shopping behind. And then it's the outside of the emotion, you're able to then process the emotion. You're allocating that time slot saying, okay, well, I can't feel it right now because I can't just leave my kid and go for a run, or I can't scream into a pillow right now, or whatever strategy works for you. Mm-hmm. And a strategy is a behavior, whatever works for you. But I can when I'm at home, or the kids are asleep, or my spouse is home, or I can get up in the morning and do it tomorrow, or I can have a shower and I can cry. Whatever works. Whatever allows you that time, space, and energy to release that emotion. So it doesn't store.
That's exactly.
Yes.
Make that time. It's got to be intentional. It's got to be intentional, particularly if you're in that situation where, like you said, you're at the shops, you can't really deal with, well, I know I've cried out in public. So you can, but it's not overly appropriate. May not be how you want to deal with it. But you're not necessarily going to deal with that emotion right then and there. But if you then just go and keep it suppressed, if you go, okay, well, it's done. I feel that anger. I still feel it within me, but I'm not going to deal with that. And you try and move on with your day and your life, you are creating a negative environment, a toxic environment within your body.
And because what happens
for your cells just to breed illness, really.
Yes. And because then your tolerance, if you don't actually release that emotion, that's when your tolerance threshold shrinks.
Yes.
Because, you've used your tolerance for one aspect of your day, then another situation arises and another one arises and another one arises. And the next minute, boom, you explode. Or you implode.
Balloon. You have a small breath, and then another breath, and then another breath, and then eventually it's just that one last one, and it might just be a little puff, and bang.
Yes. I love we use this motto a lot. I think it's a Tony Robbins one, but where your focus goes, your energy flows.
Absolutely.
And so if I'm focusing on what is happening or what that emotion is, I'm giving that emotion my energy. But if I can't do it right now, I'll give it the energy then, and I'll flow through it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not only that too, but if you are giving your emotions that energy and that focus and that attention, and that, it's creating, obviously, emotion is a chemical. And you've got these receptors. I think I actually spoke about this in last week's podcast. And you've got these receptors on the end of your cells that are then becoming accustomed to that amount of that chemical. And what happens is your body will become addicted to living in that state. And so if you are not allowing those emotions to process, and like you said, I love that wave analogy, to leave your body. If you are holding onto it, you're focusing it, but he did this, she did this, I feel this way, I'm so angry. You are going to continue to give yourself reason to focus on it because your body is going to be craving that chemical.
Yes.
So that suppressed emotion is so important to allow yourself. It's a gift and really an essential act of self-care to allow yourself that time, whether it be, whether you need to punch something, whether shaking could help you in that sort of you've got that energy, if you learn
slow breaths, journals, whatever, swimming, ocean, grounding, drumming, sound balls, crystals, incense, whatever floats your boat, whatever works for you. And I love this. I had one client, and I have permission to share this story. And grief, we talk about grief, and at funeral, heightened emotional state, right? There's a loss. And people would come and they'd touch her on the shoulder, and I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry for your loss. And so all of those receptors are going into her shoulder.
Mm.
And for years and years and years, anytime it was her dad's birthday, she would get a sore shoulder. Anytime it was her dad's anniversary, she would get a sore shoulder. Anytime she experienced grief, moving house, changing jobs, like anything, she would get a sore shoulder. And it wasn't until we collapsed the unresolved emotion that she was able to move through. She's never had a sore shoulder again.
That's amazing, isn't
And
it?
so even things like, when we're in heightened emotional states, hugging people, I'm very cautious of how I hug people when they've experienced a loss. It's not the same usual way that I hug them. And I'm just thinking of my husband. He just lost his pa recently, who was a father figure to him. And I think I hugged him like around his waist, like really low, because I didn't want to give him a normal hug and anchor that emotion. And so, being mindful about when people are experiencing heightened emotions and just giving them the space to feel what it is that they need to feel without actually unintentionally, of course, storing it within their body.
Yes, absolutely. So, Sarah, one of your many modalities that you are trained in, it's funny, we were just talking before the show about how we both have this hunger just to keep growing and learning. And so, yes, one of your many modalities, your wonderful modalities that you are trained in is you coach. Now, for listeners who are listening who may not know what that is, can you give us a little bit of an explanation? But then also, can we have a chat about why the skills that you teach are so valuable?
Yes. So EQ is emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of and express their emotional states in a resourceful and empowering way. So you're understanding that what you're feeling is what you're feeling, and you can choose at any given moment your emotions and how you want to feel. And so instead of a low emotional intelligence, which is reacting to a response that's non-threatening, right? So remembering our brains are wired for survival, there are times where the amygdala will fire off to keep us alive, because that's the part of the brain that stops us from walking out onto the road when there's traffic passing, or that goes into that instant response when we need to. And it's the primal part of the brain, except it fires off now when we get a bill or when something happens in life, instead of back in the day when we were getting chased by saber-toothed tigers kind of thing. So emotional intelligence allows you to opt in for behavioral flexibility, take on radical responsibility and ownership of how you are choosing to feel at any given moment in time. You can identify if something is unresolved within you, and you can seek out that support to resolve that emotion. You're able to manage conflict in a way that builds up your relationships instead of tearing them down. You're able to hold space for others, like we were talking about before, that society doesn't know how to handle someone when they're angry or upset. So with a more developed EQ, you're able to hold that space for people to feel whatever they need to feel. Especially kids who are in heightened emotional states, you're untriggered by it. There's no emotional response within you. It's also, you've got the skills and you're effective in non-verbal and verbal communication. You're able to read a person's body language, their tone of voice, their tempo, their gestures, their eye patterns. You're able to understand all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. They're such vital skills, aren't they, to really navigate life?
Yes. And to be able to understand how that you can resolve conflict, how you can problem solve, how you can decision. It's got that self-awareness, but it's also got the social awareness as well, and the relationship building. And so it's important. It's an important everyday tool, which is basically what the Wolfpack EQ project is all about.
I love how empowering this is, because I know you mentioned before, about feeling the way that you want to feel, and that you do have an element of control over your emotions. And I feel that is a really common misconception that a lot of people have, that your emotions are actually on the hierarchy, up there in control, and dictating how you feel and the things that you do. Whereas when you start to gain these emotional intelligence skills, and you start to gain an understanding of the inner works, and also doing your inner work, which allows for the space for this to really happen, you sort of realize that your emotions are more of a barometer to let you know when something is there to be dealt with, or when something is not right, or when you might be feeling off, or something doesn't sit with your values, or something has upset you, or whatever the case is.
Well, emotions start with a thought.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Emotions start with a thought, and then we have an emotional response, and then we have a behavior, but those thought patterns are lightning fast. And the beauty of
60,000 a day or something, I think. I'm going to argue more.
And our brain is constantly like deleting, distorting, and generalizing information, that it's rapid fast. And the best way, I guess, I could describe emotional intelligence and self-awareness is you get an emotion, or you feel an emotion, or you do an emotion because you have this physiological response, and we name that emotion. And then there's power in the pause. And we can go, okay, is this what I want to feel? Is this fact or story? Or, is this what I want to feel right now in this moment? Can I feel it later? And in that pause, we're able to decide that if that thought that we're thinking, can we reframe that thought? Or are we telling ourselves a story?
Where's the evidence? Is it even true?
Yes. Are we feeling this emotion, and then is our behavior, are we escaping, or are we finding a solution? And so it's like, okay, well, what is it can I do that right now? Like in this moment, in this power of the pause, where's the magic? Where do I want to go? What do I want to feel? Do I want to, throw a tantrum like a 2-year-old? Well, if that's the case, then I'm taking on that radical responsibility and I'm throwing a tantrum like a 2-year-old. Because if we're not stopping in that pause, we're actually not aware of our emotions. We're allowing our emotions to be in control of us, and we're not in control of them, which means that we're reacting, and we're in that state of emotional dysfunction.
And so how can you recognize if you are in that state of emotional dysfunction?
Well, you have a feeling of being misunderstood. You may feel unappreciated. There's needs that are not being met. There's reactive or emotional outbursts to situations or people that are non-threatening. We're blaming others for what's happening in our life and how we are feeling. We might get angry or hostile in conflict and confrontation. So instead of bringing water to the fire, we're adding the fire with fire and going back and forth in an exchange. We're focused on competing and winning rather than collaboration and teamwork. Or we may not feel, you become really focused on a particular topic, and you can go into that, into that downward spiral where we're unable to move along the spectrum, and we're stuck in an emotional state like depression or overwhelm, anxiety, or anything like that we become stuck in this downward spiral in like the eye of a tornado, and we can't actually feel any other emotion because we're in that emotional state that's dysfunctional.
Well, our bodies are amazing, aren't they?
Humans are
And our minds,
incredible.
and all most likely caused by the fact that you walked past the mirror and you thought you weren't looking good. You had this fleeting thought, and then all of a sudden,
You-
you've given your attention to something that you don't like, and your emotions have taken over, and it's spiraled. And I guess too, things that we do give our attention to as well are those beliefs, those thought patterns that we have, ingrained in our subconscious, that are stories, are things that we most likely have been holding on to in some element from when we were children, from those
Yeah.
first 7 years of
Yes.
life.
And I like to use the analogy like our brain will, we grow weeds. Weeds will grow no matter what. You can put weed mat down, you can use chemicals, you can, do whatever in your garden, but the weeds will always grow. They will find a way to grow. But if we want a flower to grow, we need to feed it, water it, ensure it's got right amount of sunshine. We need to pour time and energy into it. Or another analogy is like the dryer. If you've ever used a dryer, you need to clean the lint filter. Always. You cannot do a dryer cycle without the lint filter needing to be cleaned. And so it's being aware, having a higher emotional intelligence means that you're cleaning your lint filter, or you're focusing on nourishing that plant for it to grow so you can have a beautiful garden, and you pluck the weeds out. It's your ability to recognize that limiting belief or whatever story that we're telling ourselves that's really disempowering, and we can pluck it out. And go, that's not mine, actually. I'm going to believe this and I'm going to move forward with it. Or I'm going to seek support in to resolve it. Or this actually doesn't align with my values anymore. I'm going to move through that. And it comes from childhood until
Absolutely.
we're adults and we can consciously make that choice.
And those things are hard to recognize too, because when you are in that age, from 0 to 7, where it's your theta brainwave that's dominant and you are just a sponge to everything that is going on around you, you don't know what's not normal. If you are brought up in a certain way, watching mum continually put her body down, or watching dad struggle to pay the bills, or watching, an alcoholic parent, or, any kind of behavior. It doesn't even have to be that extreme. It could be any kind of behavior. This is shaping your beliefs and the way that you are perceiving the world and how you are finding your place in the world. And everything, religion, everything that you were grown up with, your environment.
Everything that you're exposed to.
Exactly. Everything you're exposed to. So as adults, when we are in these patterns, it is hard at first, because you might know something's not right. You might know that maybe you're struggling, or maybe you've been, on the brink of burnout, or you've had this repeated pattern in a relationship and keep blaming the type of man that you're attracting.
You're self-sabotaging.
Exactly, self-sabotaging. Once you are able to gain that awareness, and that could be done through a conversation, it could be done through some kind of awakening, or it could be done through working with a coach. Once you're able to gain that awareness and realize that belief, yes, it has been with you for however long it's been with you for, but it is possible to change it. Once you're aware of it, you have permission to rewrite that belief to something that is going to serve your purpose now. When you can actually be in a place where you can gain awareness of that, it's going to be a game changer for you.
Well, that's the role of your brain. It's the prime directives of the unconscious mind, that it represses memories for protection, but it will bring them to light for resolution. So, when a memory pops into your head and you're like, oh, wow, I haven't thought about that for years. That's your opportunity to then go, oh, okay, well, get curious around it and go, this has come up for a particular reason. What's the gift in that? And it doesn't come up at the right time. the unconscious mind can't tell the time.
No, you need a journal. Write it down if you need to come back to it.
Yeah, exactly right. And there's a gift in that, and there's something that's your unconscious mind has brought it up for resolution as a gift for you to say, hey, look, we no longer need this for our survival anymore. Let's get rid of it. But also too, it actually keeps emotions repressed for your protection. So if it deems it as a threat to your survival, it will keep it repressed. Mm-hmm. So sometimes people will come to me and be like, I actually cannot remember my childhood. Okay, cool. That's fine, because it's keeping you alive in that sense.
I know as babies, we are born hardwired for survival, aren't we?
Yes.
We cry because we need a need met. We are born into an environment that we have no control over. And so all we have to do is survive, and we find different ways to do that. So how do you find, or how would you sort of describe, I guess, that our emotional behavior is influenced by our childhood experiences?
So when we're kids, our parents model either resourcefully or unresourcefully how to process emotions. So depending on how our parents managed emotions, we're actually learning how to process our own. So if we go back to the brain and how it's designed for survival, we actually adapt our behaviors if we perceive a threat. So a child is likely to suppress their emotions if the parent then opts into a power player role within the relationship, which means that as the parent, they use their leverage. This is my house. This is my rules. You will do what I say to you. I'm stronger than you. I'm bigger than you. This is my house. And the child will suppress their emotions and minimize their behaviors if they deem their parent or their parent's reaction to be a threat. And so as adults, what we then tend to do is we continue that pattern, and we go through to our emotional threshold, and our tolerance, which when it closes up and we reach that threshold, will then explode, and we'll go through that emotional dysfunction. And as parents, we have so much that plays into, and at an identity level, if a child is hiding behind your legs and the parent says, oh, don't worry about them, they're just shy. Well, then the child turns around and says, okay, so I need to be shy in my life. So throughout my life, I'll go along and I'll be shy. I'll do shy because that's what I'm told. That's attached to my identity. It's the same as if a child who is naughty or gets labeled as naughty or whatever it might be, their behavioral patterns will be, I need to do unresourceful behavior to get attention because that's who I am.
Yes.
And so we create as parents this disempowering self-concept that that child who might have been shy might have needed their safety needs to be met first before they could actually be their authentic self. Yeah. Or the child who was meeting their need of significance in an unresourceful way because they wanted attention and they weren't getting attention, they then deemed that they needed to be this type of person throughout their life. And that's who I need to be, and that's who I'll become, because back when I was a kid, that's what I was told to do. So our emotional behavior is influenced by our childhood experiences, and our identity is also influenced, as we were saying, like our values, our beliefs, our attitudes, our, what we experience as kids. This all happens within our childhood because we're literally, up until the age of 7, that critical faculty, it's not there. The gatekeeper of our brain is not there. So everything is coming in.
Yeah.
And sometimes those beliefs aren't even ours.
Yes.
Say you've had a teacher who says, oh, they're not smart. They're not going to make anything of themselves. They're disruptive. They're this, they're that. That's that teacher's belief. Or you might have had a neighbor or whoever it might have been. That's their belief about you. That might not be your perception of yourself.
Yeah.
You know, I use this example. My sister has her safety needs need to be met for a longer period of time than mine do. So I personally take more risks because my safety needs are met quicker than what hers are. And that's just the way how we're wired. That's just our innate needs because they will be met on some level.
Yes.
And if we understand when we're doing or creating new experiences or understanding our children and what they need as individuals, we understand how we can give it to them resourcefully to create an empowering self-concept or an empowering identity that allows them to truly flourish in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. You take those unresourceful behaviors, say, for example, with significance, you take these behaviors that you've learned as a child because that's how you have learned to survive. That's how you've learned to protect yourself, how you learned that you get what you want. And you then take those behaviors and you continue to unresourcefully choose behaviors as you get older to meet those significance needs, those safety needs, those needs of love, those needs, of what do you call it? Stability.
Safety, connection,
Yeah,
certainty.
exactly. Yeah, certainty. Yeah, exactly. I always think of the roof falling in on my head when I think of certainty and I say stability. But yeah, so I could, but you take those dysfunctional patterns and you use them as adults and you don't, like we said earlier, really even have an awareness, that pattern is dysfunctional for you and not serving your life purpose anymore. It's really powerful once you're able to start becoming aware of the things that are being repressed. And also, I guess, as well, allowing yourself to know that it's not always going to be logical either. You've got those associations that the amygdala makes that makes sense to your amygdala, but it doesn't.
The unconscious mind is not logical.
That's exactly right. There's no
all.
logic to it. And so if you are able to be open to those processes, you are on the right path to be able to find that emotional freedom for yourself.
Yes. Because that's what life's all about, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Waking up and enjoying life, not waking up going, oh, I've got to do this again. And if we are feeling that, within a role of a job or whatever it might be, that's another opportunity to get curious and go, well, what's not aligned for me? What's incongruent that, where in my life am I incongruent or not living by my values, or, what's happening for me to be able to move through this, because I don't need to feel like this.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I don't need to feel like this. I have a choice.
Yeah,
that I can feel other things. Get curious. I love curiosity.
Absolutely. As I remember our trainers always digging that in, just get curious. And if you can do that with yourself, because the reasons that you may feel like you don't want to be going to work every day may not even be related to work. You might be able to find a core need that you are in deficit in, in another area of your life that's actually
the problem is never the problem.
No, that's right. It's never what you think it is.
No.
But what you think it is a great place to start.
It's hard to start with curiosity.
Absolutely. Sarah, this has been amazing chatting to you today. Can you tell me, for anybody who would like to work with you, how can they do that?
Well, I work one-on-one with clients, either online or in person. I am Melbourne based. And so I work sessional. We have a program, depending on what it is that you would like to resolve, depends on how many sessions that we actually do. Or we resolve anything which is unresolved through a breakthrough day. And now these are immersion days, which we resolve anything that comes up for you on that day. So again, you might come in with the problem, but it may not be the problem. And we get really curious around what's going on for you, where you would like to go, and what we can clear and move through in order to get you there. So for any of your listeners, and what I love about these days is that you don't have to constantly relive it. Like, it's not like you're reliving that unresolved trauma over and over and over again.
Yeah.
We basically nip it in the bud. And so for your community, for your listeners, Jess, I would love to offer up 5 discounted breakthrough days. So these are normally 3,000, and
Yep.
I would like to bring it down for 1,000 for 5 of your
Wow.
listeners who'd like to take up this offer.
Oh, that's such a generous discount. Thank you. Hopefully, if you do need to go and let go of some unresolved trauma and you want to do it in a day with Sarah, then absolutely reach out to her. Now, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
They can either get in touch with me through Instagram or socials, or they can email me.
Fabulous.
hello@sarahluxcoaching.com. I'm on
Easy.
Facebook.
I'll link all of these in the show notes as well. So I'll link your Instagram and your website and your Facebook and anything in the show notes too.
If you are in a downward spiral of emotions, if you are stuck, loss of identity, emotional outbursts, I just want you to know that you do not need to live this way. You can live differently. You can wake up with a purpose. You can wake up knowing and loving who you are. You can thrive in relationships. You can experience joy and unconditional love. You can have fun and play with your kids and enjoy parenting. You do not need to live in a state of uncertainty, guilt, judgment, or shame. You can have emotional freedom, because if I can do it, you can do it too.
Thank you. That is such an important.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. Thank you for listening to Inspired Wellness with Jessica. If you enjoyed and found value in today's episode, then please help it to reach others who may also benefit by subscribing on your favorite platform and leaving a review. This would mean the world to me. To get in touch with me, inquire about working privately, or experience one of my online programs, then head to www.inspiredlifecollective.com.au, and I will see you on the next episode.